Before we begin, thank you very much to, and you'll excuse me because there's two ways I could pronounce this. I'm not sure which is correct. Trinantula or Trinantula. I'm not sure which, but whichever, thank you very much for the support. It really does help keep me doing this every single day. You guys really, and like your support that you've been showing is really the reason why I'm able to keep doing this every single day, and I genuinely appreciate it. So as I speak right now, I'm here at the toy shop. I'm going to record all of my videos, all the reviews I'm going to post for while I am away at MetroCon this weekend, in order to keep the daily streak going. But the shout-out streak, to make sure I have as much time for those to come in as possible, I'm going to edit those in later. So these reviews are going to be a little bit weird in the openings as a result. But that is something you guys started. You guys were having fun continuing it, making me say goofy things, keeping the real intro from being said. So I don't want to break that if I don't have to. So I'm going to try and give it as much time as possible to make sure there's enough shout-outs to get all the way through. So that's all up to you guys at this point. And okay, and speaking of my Patreon, this is a request by Trinantula, whichever. She wanted me to actually go through. So I kind of mentioned this in a previous video, and this is something she wanted me to expand upon. During the upcoming Toxitron collection, we are seeing a whole new slew of Generation 2 decos that were never released, that are finally getting toys with modern designs, and that's kind of cool of Hasbro to do. It's an interesting place to pull from. It is a very BotCon idea for a set of figures. The trick here is that they're a little bit back and forth on what to actually do with these characters. So some of them are named after their original counterparts. You know, we have G2 Jazz, who is the bright orange and red one. Well, there's already a G2 Jazz, so you're just saying it's G2 Jazz again. In other examples, though, we have things like Shadow Strip, which during Velocitron we thought, okay, that's actually cool that they're giving new identities to the G2 Stunticons, because technically they never had canonical identities. So it was actually kind of a cool thing. And then they backpedaled because the listings for the upcoming Toxitron set just has Dead End listed as G2 Dead End. That was short-lived. But it did spur the idea. What if they kept going? What if they had started creating new personas and characters for all of these G2 repaints that we never got? So let's actually do this. Let's actually continue this plot thread. Now, I'm going to create these names and characters for a whole bunch of these G2 repaints, but I'm going to avoid certain ones. You know, the Dinobots are already established as the Dinobots, so I can't rename Swoop or Sludge or anything like that. I'm going to focus primarily on the ones that are coming out for Toxitron collection. And then we'll throw in one at the end just because I thought of something that would amuse me as far as a persona goes. But let's start off with one that we actually have a name for, and that is Cloud Cover. And when you come up with things like this, you look at the character, you look at the design and the name, and you try and figure out how does that inform who they are and their role in the Autobot and Decepticon conflict. For Cloud Cover, I'm looking at the name, and I'm looking at this sky camouflage color scheme of his, and I'm thinking this has got to be some sort of advanced level of Rainmaker, almost as if the Coneheads were advanced Seekers. I mean, they're never as efficient as them, so you know, like, this is just a hypothetical. But let's say that this is an advanced version of a Rainmaker style Seeker, all right? So with a name like Cloud Cover, I imagine that he has an ability to create more than just acid reactions in rain. So he can turn an entire Autobot side of the battlefield into an absolute wasteland as part of the Decepticons' tactics. He can also create cloud cover for the Decepticons, who of course are usually aerial based. That gives them camouflage in the sky. And his own camouflage is what lets him sneak through and fly by and create all those clouds going unseen. It's thankless work to basically just create tactical advantages for the Decepticons without actually getting into the front lines. And that would irk him a little bit, if not for the fact that he absolutely loves ruining the Autobots' day from above, whether that's with a chemical bath or a rain of flying Decepticons coming in to the battlefield. So that's kind of where I see what Cloud Cover brings to things, based on name and design. So we're kind of going to go through things like that, just to give you an example. Next one on the list is going to be Light Cycle, and this is interesting because they're kind of twisting it, because of course this is another G2 Jazz, but they're using the name Light Cycle, which was the general description of the gimmick, as the actual name. So how do we parse that? So let's imagine that the Decepticons are up to their cloning shenanigans again. They're trying to clone Jazz, but they're trying to clone Jazz in a much more efficient form, sleeker, smaller, quicker, more Decepticon in nature. Unfortunately, the clone was designed a little bit too well and did not accept the Decepticon reprogramming, which creates this alternate version of Jazz who now identifies as Light Cycle. As part of the abilities that the Decepticons gave him, he is an infiltration unit, sneaking into enemy camps or sneaking onto the Decepticon side of the battlefield in order to gain intel and report back using this little handheld drone that he's holding onto here. Because he is based on Jazz, he carries a lot of Jazz's sentimentalities and his nature but still more serious. He's not kind of like the fun lover that Jazz is. He's more dedicated to his job, but he's using Jazz's abilities with sound to actually muffle his way through any situation. He can nullify the sounds that he makes as he infiltrates, which makes him a perfect stealth unit. Ironically designed by the Decepticons themselves, now being used against the Decepticons. As for his actual combat abilities, well, the drone comes in handy there too. It lets him stay in the dark and in hiding while he lets that scout around and give you a bird's eye view of what's going on. So that's where I kind of view Light Cycle as a character. Try to push the ninja and still get some of that Jazz heritage in there. Now comes some of the fun ones, because there's a few that have no character whatsoever to them. We know they're on the way. We've seen the toys of them already, but they're really just named after their original counterparts. So we get to have whatever fun with them we want. Let's focus on this one for starters. We take a look at his design, his coloration, the tampagraphing work on here. So I've borrowed a trick that Hasbro used during Generation 2. And that is pulling names from other franchises that they have, keeping trademarks alive. So I've nicknamed him Sundown. Now, and this is kind of because they used it for their Cops toy line. I've patterned him kind of as a Cybertron Defense Force veteran, kind of a veteran cop type. So this is someone who has been well respected on the Force. He is in the last couple centuries before he retires, but he's dedicating the last years of his career here, honing the next generation of essentially Cybertronian police. Now, he's very by the books. He is very much stuck in his ways, which leads to some potential problems with his younger proteges, who are a little bit headstrong, aren't quite thinking on the battlefield the way he would. Tactically, he has become an expert marksman. He excels at disarming enemies from a range with his guns, in order to take them down without actually, slaughtering them or murdering them. He does not need excess force to bring down someone that he has been targeting. So that kind of like that big, kind of like that veteran type that's looking to teach the new generation. And we're pairing him with this version of Jazz. So we named the previous one Sundown. This one, I would suspect, idolizes the character, wanting to be like him to the point where he's named himself Sunrise. So here is where we get the traditional young upstart partner for the veteran. So we kind of have a classic dynamic between them. So Sundown is very promising as a cadet, where Sunrise is promising as a cadet, whereas Sundown is very stuck in his ways and tries to overanalyze things by how he expects things to go. Sunrise can identify things that are happening differently much quicker than Sundown can, and presents new ideas to get out of situations that Sundown just doesn't think about. It's that new age of thinking that comes about when you aren't tied down to how you've done it for, in this case, millennia. So they make a good pair. Unfortunately, being headstrong and young, Sunrise is trying way too hard to impress his mentor, and that leads to complications. There's certain abilities I try to work into some of these characters too, based on their appearance, based on the naming conventions. Because he's such a brand new bot, I'm imagining he's built from far more advanced alloys than most Cybertronians that actually allows him to superheat his body, which prevents anyone else from coming in contact with him. So he not only packs a heated punch in a fight, but also very hard to pin down by any aggressive Decepticon. So we're going to view a little abilities in there, right? How about this guy? This one was tricky. What do you do with like Neon Mirage? I tried forever to come up with something that had neon in the name, and nothing really sounded smooth enough. I end up calling him Light Beam. So I patterned him kind of a trickster amongst the Autobots. He's kind of goof-offish. He's very much likes to stand out and have attention on him. And he knows he's so good at getting attention. Not only is he an egomaniac, obviously, but he knows that he's very good at luring someone else's eye away, which makes him a really good tactician for diversion on the battlefield. Now, he can add to this, as part of his abilities, he can manipulate light, similar to Mirage, using it to go invisible. This is the opposite side of that, where he's actually manipulating photonic energy to create light bursts and blasts. It can blind an enemy, it can throw them off or confuse them. He can make it look like there's explosions or muzzle flashes happening nearby to drive them off so that he can make his getaway. Physically not a great combatant. He is there specifically to draw attention, which explains the color scheme, to say the least. In an emergency, he can pull enough photonic energy together to actually blast somebody, like Jubilee X-Men style. But that tends to scratch the paint, and he would do anything to avoid ruining the paint job. The only thing I couldn't work in is why he has alligators tampographed on him. I think that's just an Earth thing he picked up. But I definitely wanted to focus on like light and like light spectrums in order, to explain his crazy neon colors. And I think it kind of pulls back to his Mirage origins that way too. Now let's talk about these guys. So this is the big project of this video, is figuring out how to take Shadow Strip and grow that one concept. Remember, there's no character attached to Shadow Strip. It's just the name. And I have to grow that into an entire team of Stunticons. Okay, let's see what we can do. First off, let's imagine the Stunticons in general. In the toys, they were only created to kind of add variety to the Decepticons, who didn't have any ground-based vehicles, certainly not cars and trucks, the way the Autobots had. It was just something to kind of balance the sides out a little bit, same as the aerial bots. When we talk about this, I'm trying to think of like logic of why something like that would be created. And that is how I hit upon the idea for this. I call them Pursuiticons, which admittedly is not the smoothest of names, but I don't think it's any worse than Combaticons, right? So, Pursuiticons are highly trained at chasing down Autobots on the road for capture rather than destruction. If Megatron wants someone brought in, he sends Pursuiticons after them. Every one of them is designed with an advanced sensor system. They all have a certain advantage on the road, and it allows them to track down and detain any Autobot that they happen to be on a mission for. So we start this with Shadow Strip, So we have to come up with a characterization for him. I've kind of imagined him as something of a night owl style of Decepticon. He's far more comfortable in the dark than in the day, preferring the calm quiet that night tends to bring. Now, unfortunately, he is saddled with a team that has a few loudmouths on it, his leader in particular, which means it's very hard for him to find any kind of peace or serenity amongst his own team. There's another member on the team that's patterned after Breakdown that he tends to find a lot more comfort and company in, because they kind of like share the love of silence. He is designed for nighttime pursuit. With his low profile and dark color scheme, he blends into the night at high speeds, and his own sensors are designed to work best at night when everything else is pitch black. He can see everything going on clear as day. So that's where we start, and then we have to expand out from there. I mentioned Breakdown and what his eventual creation would be. I've renamed him Breakpoint. So this is a martial artist style of Cybertronian. He is highly focused, serious to a fault, and for amongst the Decepticons, that's something that could be made fun of if it wasn't for the fact that literally everyone is terrified of being on his wrong side. So the thing about Breakpoint is that he has honed his scanners on finding structural weakness in his opponents. It lets him strike where they're most vulnerable and fragile, regardless of what mode they are in. There's a vulnerable energon point. Well, now your systems are disabled. Oh, you have a little structural weakness there. Boom, well, your leg just fell off. He's that type. Well, a well-timed strike from him can disable just about any enemy he chooses. And yeah, being that serious is pretty much the only reason why Shadow Strip can stand to be around at least him. Alright, next up on the list is Dead Stop. So you have to come up. So Shadow Strip created a naming convention that I have to work with. So all of these characters are going to have half of the Stunticon name in them, but we're going to separate them out and create some counterpoints to those original characters. Dead Stop, for instance, I want to be confident, optimistic, the virtual opposite of Dead End. He often acts as the team's morale officer. He keeps their confidence high to keep their success high. And it's really his presence that's the only reason why this team doesn't fall apart between two loudmouths and two quiet types that would otherwise clash. He's the glue. He's the one that holds everyone together. He's very good at keeping eye and sensor on his surroundings. His skills excel at using the environment to his advantage to trap fleeing Autobots, herd them into the direction he wants them to go in to run into his fellow Pursuiticons, or in a battle, really good at all that like 90s cartoon nonsense of dropping things on someone, making them fall into pits, using the environment as a weapon. That's his tactic. So again, keep it very different. We keep it very different. Let's talk about Wild Charge. Okay, so we need a hothead for the team, and it's going to be Wild Charge here. He is the first one to lose patience in a plan or strategy the second something goes wrong. He's the first one who wants to go in and just wreck into whoever they are actually in pursuit of. And if it wasn't for fear of their leader, he would probably just be a loose cannon on this team. He can't afford that because he's actually really useful for a team. His sensors are designed to detect energon, which means he can tell the reserves that are in the Autobots they are pursuing. If they're pursuing an entire group, that lets him pick out the weakest one that they need to target. Or it's a way of knowing how weak someone is and when they are ripe to pick off. In his case, he also has an ability that lets him overcharge his body around him with electrical power. His vehicle mode is basically a rolling dynamo that charges up the faster he goes. So slamming into him is akin to getting hit with a taser, right? So that's where his need to like crash into things kind of comes from. because he's more confident in that sometimes than he is his team's abilities. And then we get to Motor Breath. Motor Breath is a name they used for a Legion class Motor Master back in the day. And I love reusing old names as new characters. I always think that's a really fun trick to do. So we're going to retain the name Motor Breath, and we're going to use that. He is a loudmouth braggart. He is very vocal about himself, his team. He's in any Autobot they tend to capture, he's the one who's really going to be like really boisterous about basically just mocking them for being captured. Now, I'm using the G2 repaint version here from Combiner Wars. Imagine, like, this is more akin to, like, in my head, I'm actually imagining this as the Commander class, the full-size, the modern Motor Master with a trailer, because he's going to be the carrier. His rear is reinforced to capture any Autobot that they have captured can be stored inside his trailer, and they're not getting out. Once they're in, they're in. And then it's just a one-way trip to be delivered to Megatron's doorstep. So, yeah, you basically, if you get captured by him, be ready to go insane just by how much he's going to talk your ear off about how great they are on the way to Megatron. You might welcome running into Megs at that point. And just to keep the sensor gimmick going, I patterned him to actually have sensors that are attuned to all the other Pursuiticons, to keep them actually in line and keep them focused on a plan. It's basically a system of coordination for the entire team. So, and then we have to talk about the combine mode. So, we can't use Menasor, can't use that, of course. So, we have an entire team that is designed around pursuit and capture, rather than destruction. So, I took the capture thing to try and figure out some kind of intimidating name for the combiner. The name I came up with was Incarcerous. I like the name. I like how it works. This puts all of their sensor systems together. This allows Incarcerous to scan for Autobots within a mile's radius of him. They cannot hide, they cannot run, they cannot sneak up on Incarcerous. He knows everything that's happening on the battlefield at any given point. And because of that, it makes him far more intelligent than many of the other Decepticons on the battlefield, especially the other combiners. Usually when Megatron is off the field, he's the one making all the commands to the other Gestalts, because he actually has the tech to allow them to actually organize and start outmaneuvering the Autobots on the field. I really like this idea. I really like, of all things in this list, I really like the idea of like patterning the Stunticons as like a pursuit and capture team. And I think it works. I think it works really well for the whole group. Okay, so I can continue on from there. Admittedly, I had one more to go, but I'm well over 20 minutes already, and I kind of don't want this to go that long, so we're going to cut it off there and potentially shelve this for another day, because there's plenty of other G2 toys that never came out that we could potentially do this with again at some point. If you like it, let me know in the comments below if you want to see the extent of this, the weird repainted Starscreams that were never officially released. The counterpoint to Laser Cycle Jazz, the Soundwave repaint. There's plenty of places we could go from here. So, if you want to see it again, let me know. And I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alafi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.